Introducing myself, I'm Bernie Curran, a patron of the Newcastle Institute and your MC for the evening. So first of all, I'd like to pay my respects on our behalf to the ancestors of the Awabakal tribe and to the spirits of those who are the guardians of the land where we meet. Secondly, I'd welcome all of you and thank you for coming along to share in the proceedings. This is our opportunity to meet the candidates, and it's an opportunity for the candidates to share their thoughts, their hopes and their ideas with us. I also welcome the candidates themselves. It's great to have you here. It's a good opportunity for you to speak with us and to, as it were, get the feel. I also want to acknowledge the Hunter Business Chamber, in particular Kristen Keegan and Georgia Collison, who played a part in organising tonight and played a part in sponsoring it, and to the Newcastle Herald, who have played their part in supporting, particularly in the organising, collating of the questions that were called for from the general public. I also acknowledge Bar TV, who are here to record this evening with the wonderful new technology and show it to the world. Maybe even Vladimir Putin is watching and maybe frightened of being shirt-fronted. I also want to thank the panellists who played a part. We met on Monday to try and bring some order and prioritising into the questions. There were a vast array of questions that came in that were relevant to both the by-elections that are coming on, and so it's a question of sorting them what was relevant to here, and also to look at the issues that weren't discussed in those questions. I want to thank Garth Russell, whom many of you will know has been a long-time journalist with the ABC and who is well known around the community. And he is here to be the interviewer, and he's met with the panellists, he's discussed the questions, he's helped to prioritise them. So thank you to Garth. And the procedure for tonight, and I'm sure all of our candidates know this, essentially we're going to have each candidate is to present for 2 minutes on their policies and the vision that they present as a candidate for Charlestown. Each candidate will receive a personal interview for 4 minutes with Garth. These will be based on the questions from those from the panel, and they may follow questions as appropriate, the questions that might arise. Then each candidate is given a 1 minute time to wrap up. So this has been done with a view to getting representation from the community through the questions that have been sent to us. We think we have captured the breadth and the interest because there was, as I said, a tremendous depth and breadth of questioning which expresses the hopes really of you people that this be run well and that this be a good avenue for getting the best possible result out of this sort of process. So thank you, Garth, and over to you.
Thanks, Bernie. Now, just to make sure everyone can hear us okay? No problems? You can't see. Well, that's probably not a bad thing, but except when the candidates come up. I don't know if we've got any lights or lighting we can...
After the video.
Oh, okay, we're going to play the video and then you'll be able to see us. Right, okay. Thank you, Ross. My role is really just to help filter through the questions that Bernie was talking about that have been supplied to us. The important thing, and I thought about this, I think the important thing is that we get a sense of obviously what the candidates stand for. And I'll base my questions, because obviously I'm not going to be able to run through all these questions, based on the candidates' 2 minute presentation. So if you see me rifling through pieces of paper as I'm interviewing, it's probably because I'm looking for questions that are going to be relevant to what the candidates have already spoken about. As Bernie said, if anything comes up in that conversation, and believe me, 4 minutes is going to go very quickly, I will do my best to extrapolate on that point. I'll be given a signal 30 seconds out from the end of that 4 minute interview, and we will be doing our utmost to keep to time, so obviously it's fair to all candidates. I don't work at the ABC anymore, but I do still have that unbiased chip in my head. So I certainly, that's a joke, by the way. So no, it's true. It's a joke, but it's true. So I have no no affiliation with any of these people, and I will be very much unbiased in my ways of interviewing as well. Just quickly to let you know, we did, as Bernie said, have an awful lot of questions come through covering many topics. I've broken them down into things like general, then we have areas like infrastructure, transport, accountability, funnily enough, and there's a few other areas that we might touch on as well. So lots to get through. I thought there's a couple I might, as an opening gamut, if you like, of the sort of general concerns that people seem to have. This one came through loud and clear, and it sort of, I guess, represented a few. This one said, I want accountability, I want honesty, I want integrity, I want someone from my area representing me in government. I want them to have only the best interests of the area in their plans and discussions. We need an honest politician. Good luck finding one. As the saying goes, how do you know when a politician is lying? They're moving their lips. That's a bit flippant. Also flippant was, the price of 2 years old is far too high, please fix that. We've ditched that one for more important issues, which we will certainly be discovering tonight. So each candidate will be giving us a 2-minute presentation. Directly after that presentation, I will then conduct a 4-minute interview. Now, the first candidate we've made a slight adjustment for, because it's actually Jane Oakley. Now, Jane is in New Zealand today at the moment. A family funeral has taken her away. So to stand in for Jane will be Philippa Parsons to answer some questions for 4 minutes. But before we do that, Jane has recorded this 2-minute presentation for you to have a look at.
Charlestown voters have been dumped into the New South Wales corruption scandal and a by-election costing taxpayers $750,000 because of greed and a lack of integrity. And while this is shocking, it's not surprising. We've seen it before. In 2011, there was a massive swing to the Liberal Party because back then it was the ALP's corruption being exposed at the ICAC. And while we had a change of government, we haven't had a change in system. O'Farrell and Baird have picked up where Tripodi and McDonald have left off. It's time we redefined our political system. We need to reform political donations. We need to reform our planning system. And we need to have a political framework that prioritises best outcomes for families, for communities and for small businesses. And good outcomes for our young people. In Charlestown, we have one of the highest rates of youth unemployment in the state, 5% higher than the state average. And at the same time, we have one of the worst public transportation systems in our region. So while we should be making it easier for our young people to get a quality education, cuts to TAFE and a rubbish public transport system is making it more difficult. And we're at risk of losing our local TAFE. Ongoing cuts to the TAFE budget means Belmont TAFE is facing closure, putting those teachers out of work and meaning that people have to travel even further to complete their courses. I don't think this is good enough. I'm proud to be standing for the Greens. We've been calling for donation reform for a decade and a half. We've been calling for a better planning framework. We've been calling for investment in public education. Here locally, we should be supporting working parents by having affordable and accessible childcare. We should have a good public transportation system that allows people to go to where they need to and back again in a timely manner. And we need to transition from coal to a jobs-rich, renewable energy economy. Voters have the chance to achieve real change this election. So if you want clean air, clean water and clean politics, then vote clean and vote Green.
Philippa, if you'd like to come up and maybe follow up on some of those points. Just here would be fine, thank you. So let's start with youth unemployment. There was a question here that said, I would like to know what the candidates feel they could do at a state level to address the huge problem of youth unemployment. This is obviously something that's been looked at for a while. What are your thoughts there?
Well, certainly. The Greens have always advocated for increased funding for public education, and that's from preschool up to TAFE. Successive governments have sought to undercut that funding, particularly to TAFE, and this is where we need our young people to get skilled up to be able to enter the workforce. The Greens, so a second approach would be to diversify our jobs, diversify our economy. Now, there has been modelling done by the University of Newcastle that shows around almost 80,000 new jobs across the Lower Hunter could be created through manufacturing in a transition to renewable energies and away from the coal industry. The dirty fossil fuel industry is employing less and less people and needing less and less skills. The Greens see a way forward is to skill up our young people in this new renewable energy economy.
The area of public transport is one that's come up time and time again in our questions. In this specific area, and I guess we also look at the region as well as being a big issue, but in this specific area, what is the Greens' take on the priorities as far as public transport goes?
Well, I believe that East Lake Macquarie is one of the most poorly serviced areas in the Hunter by public transport. It is woeful. If we really want to transition away from using our cars, get people out of cars and into public transport, we need to have something that is reliable, it's timely, you don't have many interchanges, you can get from A to B, as Jane said, in a timely manner. We also believe that we need to look at increased connectivity for cycle paths as well that are off-road. So we don't have our cyclists in fear of their lives every time they decide to leave the car at home and cycle to work or wherever they need to go.
And this is an obvious one for the Greens, to do with the coal trucks and covering the coal trucks. We also had a specific question in regards to that.
I mean, this atmospheric pollution from uncovered coal wagons is an issue that concerns us all. We've got increasing asthma on the rise and lung problems in our children. It's something that needs to be done. It needs to be done now. It's been on the discussion board for years. It needs to be legislated, and the coal companies need to come on board and admit that there is a problem and do something about it before it starts to seriously impact on the health of all of us, particularly the most vulnerable, the children and our elderly.
TAFE was mentioned, education generally, but specifically TAFE. A lot has been decided about TAFE. What's the Greens' take on what could be changed?
Well, as I said, the Greens have always been strongly supportive of public education from preschool for 3-year-olds all the way through high school and into TAFE. Now, if we're cutting jobs at TAFE, it's not only the jobs of the TAFE teachers, but it's those areas within TAFE that are providing the skills for our young people to then enable them to seek employment in the workforce. We are de-skilling our young people. Cutting funding from TAFE and privatising education means there are certain sections of the community who will be able to afford to obtain those skills, and other sections who just do not have the funds to pay the private providers for this education they need to enter the workforce. It's a vicious cycle, and the Greens, I believe, are the only party who seriously are looking to rectify that.
All right, Philippa, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Philippa Parsons for Jane Oakley. Okay, I'd like to welcome to the microphone Jodie Harrison, please.
Thanks, Garth. I am a Charlestown resident, and I'm running to be an elected representative the community can trust. But I know that I need to earn that trust. I've been listening and hearing very clearly that people are angry and disillusioned with their elected representatives. What I'm asking is that people look at my record as Mayor and local councillor on Lake Macquarie Council, and to judge me not just on what I'm saying now, what I've said in the past, but on my record and my actions at Lake Macquarie Council and the resulting performance of the council against other councils in the area. The priorities that I've been hearing people talking about as I've been having conversations, knocking on people's doors, working on street stalls, are about local jobs. People want local jobs in Charlestown, and they want members of parliament to be committed to supporting local jobs, not offshoring them as we've recently seen in relation to New South Wales rail carriage contracts, or sending them interstate like we have done with our New South Wales buses. People want to see their MPs committed to a quality education system, which means proper funding, not the cuts that we've seen through Tony Abbott's cuts to schools, and not the cuts that we've seen to the present cuts that we've seen at state level at TAFE. People also want to see members of parliament who are committed to more investment in health, and that includes better resources at John Hunter Hospital and no GP tax, putting further pressure on our public hospital system. These are the issues that I'm committed to working on if I'm elected, and I'm asking for your support.
Thanks, Bernie. There's a question here, I guess this relates to probably reasonably specifically, and we're looking at an interesting period of time. We're looking at 5 months before the next election. We're looking at what strategies and how people are going to make a difference if they're elected in that time. This question comes through: if Newcastle and Charlestown are regarded as safe Labor seats, are we doomed to be treated with contempt by the bureaucrats in Sydney?
I think 2011 proves that Newcastle and Charlestown are not safe Labor seats. 2008 also proved that. I firmly consider Charlestown a marginal seat, and I'll certainly perform that way if I'm elected on the 25th of October, and I think the bureaucrats will certainly be hearing that quite clearly.
Obviously, also areas of electoral donations have been looked at. Will we see a change in the way donations can be received by candidates at the next election, and will all donations over a certain amount be made public before elections? Now, I know things have already started to change, but what is your take on electoral donations?
I support public funding. It's certainly Labor policy to support full public funding of elections. There needs to be some work done on how that exactly works, because obviously candidates need to pay for things up front. But that will take a lot of the risk out of needing to fund the way that we actually need to campaign. I mean, I'm actually hearing a lot of the information that I put out is actually to raise awareness, not just of my policies, but it's also to raise awareness for people that there is an election on. So many people only know there's a by-election on because they're getting something in their letterboxes, and it's not through media, it's actually through campaigning.
And you talked about employment, obviously. Any specifics, any particular areas that you see as a real priority in this region? There's
a couple of things that government can do as far as supporting jobs. Firstly, the way that government procures. Contracts are a really good way of government supporting jobs in the area, and it's Labor's policy to put I'll go back to the way that tenders are assessed. When any government assesses a tender, they put a score at the end. They score each tender at the end of the process. It's Labor's policy, and I think it's a fantastic policy, to actually put a loading of 20% on New South Wales tenders and 25% loading on New South Wales regional tenders. So that actually overcomes where there might be quite a big price difference, but it recognises that there's an incredible social benefit to having jobs in New South Wales and locally, and that often doesn't come down to dollars.
This comment: I want a candidate whose agenda is statehood for the region, our resources for our region. I know that sounds a bit like a Dorothy Dix statement, but how strong are you about assuring that? Is that along the lines of what you're saying there?
A fair share of resources, a fair share for absolutely. I mean, you just need to look at what's happened with our port and the fact that at the moment only less than a third of the net proceeds of the sale of our port are committed to this region. There's certainly a strong commitment from Labor to spend at least half of the net proceeds of the sale of the port in this region, in Newcastle and in Charlestown and in the other Hunter electorates. And I think that's right. We are the area that's creating the benefit, and we need to see a better share than what's currently being given.
Jodie Harrison, thank you very much. I'd like to invite Luke Arms up now for his 2-minute presentation. Thank you, Luke.
Thanks, Garth. First, I'd like to thank the Newcastle Herald, the Hunter Business Chamber and the New Institute for providing this opportunity for meaningful engagement between voters in the Charlestown electorate and these crazy people who are asking to represent them in Parliament for a few months. Thanks also to my fellow candidates for being here. Disagreements aside, it's genuinely wonderful to share moments like this with you, to remember that democracy really is alive in Australia, and to pause and reflect on how beautiful that is. But because all of us are here for a reason, and it's not just because democracy is beautiful. I'm here because I ran out of words with which to vent on Facebook about the state of Australian politics. No, seriously. I find it devastatingly sad that our federal and state governments consider equal access to quality healthcare and education for all Australians to be undesirable. That they deliberately choose ignorance and ideology rather than facts and science and progress. That they unapologetically deliver the exact opposite of what they promise. But most of all, I'm sad about the money. I'm not referring to brown paper bags specifically, although they are part of the problem. I'm referring to the money that seems to drive every political decision. It doesn't seem to matter how much anti-corruption legislation is passed or how many scandals are uncovered by ICAC. The sad reality is that big money always finds a way to buy influence over politicians, and more often than not, politicians find a way to look after the interests of big money. By big money, I'm referring to the wealthy donors who bankroll big political parties. I'm referring to powerful third-party campaigners who can make or break elections. You know, trade unions, mining magnates, the owner of News Corp, All of these and more get what they want out of our governments, and the rest of us pay for it. We pay for it out of our back pockets. We pay for it with our futures. We pay for it with our planet. I vent about these things because I'm passionate about people, I'm passionate about our future and about our planet. So, when I ran out of words on Facebook, I decided it was time for action, and that's why I'm here.
So, Luke, let's talk about some specifics, and I'll ask you a fairly general question. You've talked about your general philosophy. When you look at areas like unemployment, when you look at transport, when you look at those issues that are specific to this area but also general, are there any of those that you have a particular passion or an interest in?
Being an IT manager, I'm fairly passionate about technology. Okay. I think that's a potential growth area for this region that is often overlooked. There's fantastic work being done this week with the Dig Festival. I don't know how many of you are aware of that. So there's major opportunities here that are not necessarily being pursued and supported to the extent they should be by government. So I guess that's one particular area I'm passionate about. As others have already talked about, I share views with Labor and the Greens really on the opportunities for manufacturing here as well that could be triggered by state government investment and so on.
We have a question here to do with infrastructure sell-offs. What are the candidates' views on infrastructure sell-offs? Will they be actively fighting against any more of the state's assets being sold off? Have you got an opinion on that?
Absolutely. I think pretty much none of the privatisation deals that we're talking about at the moment on the state government agenda can be justified on any rational grounds. There's no long-term planning involved. It seems to be just about getting a short-term budget bottom line. At the end of the day, whether it's power infrastructure, whether it's TAFE, which is effectively being privatised by stealth. The losers are everyone except the new owners of these assets, as far as I can tell. We have a short-term budget increase for that year, then we lose the ability to make revenue off that piece of infrastructure, lose the ability to manage and have governance over those assets. People pay more, there's less choice. All in all, privatisation is bad as far as I'm concerned, as a general rule.
All right. Concerns about the NBN, the rollout of the NBN in this region, you would share those, I would imagine?
Absolutely. I don't think it was managed very well under Labor. It's being absolutely destroyed under the Liberal government. Wish there was more that could be done about it at a state level. I suppose there can be campaigning towards towards federal. Disappointing to see the way the speeds have been downgraded. The lack of foresight in terms of how much data we are going to need to push down these pipes, not just now but 10 years in the future. Definitely would like to see much more investment in that. And questions to do with technology, science and mathematics generally to make this a smart region to help us grow economically. I would imagine that's in your area of interest. Yeah, definitely. I think as has already been said, interest and demand for coal is waning. Our key economic drivers in this region are not necessarily going to be there for the long term, so we need to start looking at diversifying and certainly opportunities to build lots of smaller businesses, smarter businesses are critical. And I think state government should have a strategic role in that by providing infrastructure that can attract more growth in regions rather than in cities.
And one quick question before we wrap up with you. The whole notion of this by-election taking us through to next March, what's your feeling about being able to hit the ground running if you were elected into this seat?
I hope you're going to ask every candidate that question. Yeah. Look, I think you have to be realistic about the amount of time there is to get work done. I certainly have outlined some of the things I'll try to push for in that time. There's not that many sitting weeks, but there's certainly time to agitate, and that's all I can promise is that I'll agitate as hard as I can.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Luke Arms. I'd like to welcome Sue Ellen Wrightson to give us her 2-minute presentation.
Thank you, Garth. Welcome here this evening to everybody, and thank you for coming along to listen to us. My name is Sue Ellen Wrightson. I don't like the word politician, as I'm sure a lot in the community don't like the word politician. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and we're all very familiar with the ICAC investigations that highlighted the severe deficiencies in the two big parties. A couple of the things that I find very important for the electorate are health. Funding medical and scientific research to find ways of improving treatments for disease and ultimately finding cures will take pressure off our health system. If patients are in hospital for shorter periods of time, it will result in less costs to our health system and be a real benefit to the patient. We must not privatise our healthcare system. The state government must remain responsible for public healthcare to ensure quality standards are maintained. A public-private partnership, similar to what is being considered in the Hunter Valley by the current government, will provide two different standards of patient care. A private company is in the business of making a profit, and this can only result in uncertainty for our doctors, nurses, and set the profit as the main focus in the delivery of healthcare services at a cost to the elderly, the sick and the injured. Moving on to jobs. Jobs growth can only occur by supporting business. In an ever-changing economic climate, business is forced to adapt or not survive. I want to reduce the burden of compliance, particularly on small business, resulting in less time doing the books and more time actually growing the business. I want to see the thresholds for payroll tax amended, giving those smaller businesses an exemption, particularly in the start-up phase. I want to see grant funding continued to providers such as our business enterprise centres that assist new businesses to get off the ground. I support further funding for TAFE in order to focus on the development of training packages and the recruitment of specialised teachers to meet skills shortages and meet the demands of those emerging and boom markets. The digital economy is rapidly growing, and supporting our shopfront businesses to survive through that is a high priority for me. Thank you.
Sue Ellen, I wanted to ask you, they're fairly general, some specific thoughts that you have on this area. You've sort of covered it to a point, but youth unemployment, that's come up a few times, and it's obviously a big concern. Can you expand on that particular focus of unemployment in this region?
We have a lot of young children doing their HSC as we speak, and I really do wonder what those children are going to do when they get their exam results. They may not get the entrance into university. They may not be able to pay for their university tuition, and that is an absolute concern of mine. I feel that some of those students will look towards our TAFEs as an alternate opportunity to further their education, and I believe that there is a direct linkage between our educational institutions and our youth in order to give them the skills that they might need to get out into the marketplace and to get jobs in areas such as IT, some of those more emerging areas. I think that gone are the days of the traditional, you'll get a job at the news agency once you leave school while you do some part-time study. I think things are getting very, very tough, and we need to come up with innovative ways of supporting those young unemployed people. You know, we can't expect them to pay a lot of money to go out and get those skills and qualifications. It's giving them that little bit of a hand up so that they can climb that mountain.
Once again, donations is obviously going to be in people's minds. What's the party and your take on any changes that should be made to the electoral donation system?
I don't believe for 1 second that the state or anyone sitting in this room should have to pay for politicians to run for office. I believe that if you're fair income about running for office, then you should take it out of your own pocket, and I believe that there should be a set limit for every single candidate. It's terribly unfair, the system that we have at the moment, and I will just say that we have got a whole table of wonderful candidates here tonight, and some that have it a little easier than others would be a fair thing to say, but not for a second do I believe that it should be coming out of the public purse. This by-election, as Jane Oakley correctly pointed out, and I do think that it is a little bit bigger than $750,000, but this is costing the state an enormous amount of money, and I would have preferred to have seen that money go towards the John Hunter Hospital, towards buying some equipment for, you know, our cancer patients, an MRI scanner. It's incredibly upsetting to me, and I guess one of the reasons that I've decided to run as a candidate.
And your take on this by-election, the timing of this by-election, the general election in March, I'll ask you where you see this fitting into the big picture.
It's 12 sitting days of Parliament, and I wonder how much you can achieve within that 12 sitting days. I have a been my bonnet about openness and being transparent. I would like to tackle the Government Information Public Access Act. It's the new version of the Freedom of Information Act. I don't believe that it's really acting as it should be intended. You have open access documents that would allow the public to come in and look at documents relating to development applications, and that's not happening because the government's hiding behind the Copyright Act or they're hiding behind other pieces of legislation. So that would be the very first thing I do, is try and open up that information channel back to the public within 12 days.
Good luck with that.
Thank
Sue
you.
Ellen, Brighton,
Thank
you
you.
very much. Thank you. Right, next to give his 2-minute presentation, would you please welcome to the dais Brian Tucker.
Good evening, and thank you for all attending. I'm a resident of the Charlestown area. I have been for many years. I'm a pastor, and like Sue Ellen, I don't like referring to myself as a politician because I actually care about people. My policies involve, number one, health. I am of the view that we have a duty to improve access, affordability and quality of care for all citizens because of their human dignity. I affirm that all Australians, irrespective of their income or location, should have access to essential health services. Now, the degree of care given at an emergency department, those first few hours are crucial to the recovery of a patient, and this may involve many hands on deck, to which a shortage of staff can contribute to a poor outcome. I will pursue to have a mandated nurse to patient ratio in order to carry out safe patient care for those who present to an emergency department. Jobs in industry. The manufacturing industry is a major employer in the Newcastle area, and it is a key contributor to our local economy. That's a fact. I acknowledge and understand that the business sector, both large and small, is vital to the community as it provides employment to many families who need work for a living, families that are struggling. Small and medium-sized retailers are consequently worthy of special support and consideration. Education. Every child has the right to an education, and all parents must have the right to choose the school for their children that supports their beliefs, traditions and values of their home life. I would seek a fairer system of curriculum development by means of an independent panel of qualified personnel that includes students and parents and teachers and universities and TAFE employers and government. Curriculum development must be accountable to the main stakeholders in education, and it should not be led predominantly by academics, politicians or bureaucrats. Law and order. I'm for bringing back a modern form of the old Summary Offences Act that was dismantled in the 1980s, along with police powers that had enforced society's standards. And those Summary Offences Acts used to deal with offensive language and conduct, obscene exposure, damage to property and violent disorder. The judiciary to be brought into the 21st century like the rest of society, and to have a lifetime of their appointments reduced to 5-year performance contracts that is overseen by a board of ordinary citizens from the community, headed up by a chairman. This system would allow magistrates and judges to be assessed on their work rate and their success in dispensing justice in a manner that reflected community standards. This would bring some accountability back into the judicial system, thus curtailing a lot of corruption that takes place in the system.
Thank you, Brian. Covered a few areas there. What do you see as a way? There's a lot of things that you're concerned about, a lot of things you'd like to see changes to. How do you see that working as you in the New South Wales Parliament? What would be your first steps?
Look, the reason that I came into Parliament was I've just sick and tired and fed up with dealing with corruption, one department after another, and people not being given a fair go. And working as a pastor and having people come to me with issues that have been affected by corrupt behaviour has spurred me on to take up this role. Now, there are a lot of issues at hand here. For a start, looking at health, I'd like to see, in particular, in our emergency departments, more nursing staff. I worked for the ambulance service for 20 years, and I understand what nursing staff go through, particularly in a crisis. So I'd like to see that ratio of 1 nurse to 1 patient.
I guess to follow up on that question, do you see your role as being one where you can actually, and we do have these questions asked a bit where people are asking about your ability to make that happen within a government?
Look, I'll certainly go into bat. That's one of the issues on my agenda, and it's certainly one of those issues that I will take up because I believe it needs to be a priority. We have sick and injured people coming to casualty departments and waiting goodness knows how long to be seen. And I believe that's unacceptable in this day and age.
And this sense of this time frame to the next election, to this by-election and the next election, what are your hopes realistically?
Look, there's a fair bit to do, and I've already set myself a plan should this occur of what I need to do. I know we've only got a short amount of time, sitting time in Parliament, and if elected, I mean I need to make good of that time.
And you mentioned law and order. This is an issue close to your heart. We had a couple of questions.
Yes, I did, and
that
goes back to my ambulance service days of picking up drunken and drug-induced people on the street and not having respect for people in uniform, not only police but ambulance officers, and I sympathise with police officers because I know what they have to go through. They do the hard work to get these people before the courts, and then they get a slap on the wrist and a feather duster treatment, and they're out the door and they're back doing the same thing they were initially brought before the court for. So the whole system needs to be revamped. Police need to be able to have those tools to do their job.
And we've got a little bit more time. A minute, okay. I want to ask you about, you mentioned education.
Yes.
Youth unemployment has come through, as I've mentioned before, as strong. What is a specific focus as far as youth unemployment goes?
Look, the issue that I see with unemployment is the fact that we've got so many people going into universities. We've got people at the moment doing their HSC, and there's really no guarantee at the end of the day whether they're going to get a job or not. So what I propose is to go into bat for the youth. I'd like to see more apprenticeships, more business, even small businesses taking people on, more training programs to better equip our youth. And I believe that should be starting in our at the end of our year 11 and year 12 to better equip our youth.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Thank you, Brian Tucker. All right, to give us his 2-minute presentation, would you please welcome RJ Martin.
Hello. Firstly, a little bit about my background. I finished school locally. I lived in a bunch of suburbs in the area, from Adamstown Heights to Warners Bay, Cardiff, etc. I went to Newcastle University, where I was initially studying science and teaching degrees while I was 17 years old. I then switched to a Bachelor of Business degree, etc. I had some involvement with the council through the community advisory group for about 4 years, as well as the Place Charlestown Youth and Community Centre. My family's had a long history of helping people, civic responsibilities, etc. My great-great-great-great-grandmother used to run a pub by herself on a Victorian goldfields. Her grandson, back in the 40s and 50s, was a Labor bigwig and ran for Parliament for Labor. I'm not sure exactly what happened with that because both my parents are deceased, etc. I have a comprehensive list of different policies and some thoughts behind that on my website, rjmartin.com. And Some of the things I'm particularly interested in are law reform, electoral reform, health reform, transport reform. I'm for having an integrated transport network within the Hunter Valley region, so you don't have trains competing with buses, etc. Utilising demand management systems and mini buses, for instance, when there is low demand, which is based on historical records. Each time you swipe your card or do your Opal card, etc. I'm against special rates variations and other harmful things to local businesses, where the Labor candidate voted to increase people's residential rates by 68.4% over 4 years, and business rates by 89.4% over 7 years, which even IPART said was too high. The Labor candidate, the Liberals miss out on my barrage because they're not running, but Labor has had a number of, which I appreciate, there's a lot of Labor people here as well, they've had a number of issues in the past with not telling the truth to people. Just before the last state election, the Labor Party claimed that they bought a dredge for Lake Macquarie and Swansea Channel in particular. That was an outright lie. The Labor candidate also said before becoming mayor, as part of her platform, that she would ensure that the Cameron Park area along North Lakes Drive and Minmai Road would get a roundabout. That hasn't happened.
But what are you going to do, mate? Not what they didn't do.
So, if you let me continue, then I can tell you, I assume you're one of the Labor supporters, but that's fine. So I'll get onto that in the last roundup minute, and thanks for wasting time. Anyway, good job doing that. Jodie also claims that she supports local businesses, yet prints of flyers in Sydney. She also is using people from Sydney in thunderclap.
I think we'll have to, for fairness reasons, we've gone past the 2 minutes, so we might just wrap it up. Thank you. Well, let's talk about public transport.
Yeah.
And some specifics, because we've got questions here where people are desperately looking at answers for public transport problems, such as how inefficient buses are in this region, lack of taxis at peak periods, bike tracks, and the like. So can we get an overall picture of what some of your answers are as far as public transport in this region is?
Yeah, well, no candidate in this current by-election will or be able to influence Parliament all that much, besides if they do certain tactics such as...
Well, can we ask you what your
So I'm getting on to that. So my preference for Newcastle Rail, for instance, would be cut and cover. It's a lot cheaper. It's about $200 million predicted or estimated by GHD, a local engineering firm. That also enables people to, when you cover it, you can build low-rise apartments, etc., which increases the population of Newcastle CBD, revitalise that. There's other things such as the Fassifern to Hexham rail bypass, which gets rid of a lot of problems, I'm told, such as the Adamstown Gates issue, where people are waiting 40 minutes in an hour in the mornings to get to work or get wherever they have to be. I'm for duplication of roads such as City Road and Hillsborough Road. You have transport bottlenecks along main areas, which some people don't like cars, but cars are helpful for people.
Do you have an opinion on cycleways, how that could be improved in the Charlestown area?
So I cycle myself, but unfortunately there's only around 1.6% of people travel regularly via cycle to work, etc. I'm not for converting whole roads into bicycle lanes, etc., but I believe people should be able to ride on footpaths, which that's currently illegal unless you're teaching a child under 10 to ride on a footpath or are under 10 yourself.
And as far as, once again, the economy, the health of the economy and youth unemployment, have you got a stance on that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of issues with local employment. A lot of it is federally based, unfortunately. There's such decisions as Lima Declaration that was made in 1975 that was for the redistribution of wealth globally, which doesn't help locals with their employment. I'm also against, you go to Woolworths and they've got robots serving you now instead, self-serve checkouts for customer service roles. Places like Telstra offshoring telemarketing jobs, etc.
And what are your plans for between now and the 25th as far as campaigning goes?
Yeah, so the way I see it, I can be elected as a caretaker. As I said, there's not much power that a candidate will have because the Liberals overwhelmingly control both houses of Parliament, but I can work on behalf of people. People come up to me with their problems, I can try and get them fixed. However, I have to do it. If I have to be very vocal to the government or otherwise. I don't mind if things are federal issues or if they're state issues or council issues. I am for fixing it. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, please welcome for his 2-minute presentation, Mark Sky. Sorry. Musical chair, sorry about that.
Hello, people of Charlestown and the world, and Mr. Putin. I'm very sorry I photoshopped my head onto your shirtless body. It was absolutely out of admiration. So, my name is Mark Sky. I am recently a father. I have a fiancée. I am a radiographer and cardiac technician. I grew up in Cahaiba, and apart from recently I lived in Sydney for 4 years. So I'm back in Charlestown now and loving it. Some of the things I'm passionate about are health, infrastructure, and education. But most importantly, if I could get you to remember one thing, is that how dangerous it could be to vote for a major party at this or the next election. And I can understand that, I used to like Labor a lot, and then I liked Liberals a little bit, a bit disenfranchised. But to be told that, that we're going to do stuff for you as long as we get in the next election, and then when you're in opposition to basically block any progress at all, that just, to me, is like being held at ransom. I think that people should, I have nothing against Jodie personally. I think she could end up being, the least corrupt person on this panel. But at the end of the day, she does represent the Labor Party and its interests. So, if the Liberal Party get in March, which I'm sure they will, because at the end of the day, sports bets have got them at favourite, and they're not in the business of losing money. You're not going to have any progress in this area, and I'd like to see compromise for whoever gets in, and to move forward, forget about things that have happened in the past in terms of lost industry, because we can't get certain things back, and some things are out of your control. But what you can control, you should do as much as you can to make it better for the area.
Well, stand-up comedy could be second choice if politics doesn't play out for you. Mark, you talked about your disenfranchisement from the major parties, and that's come through. But I guess I've got a list also of questions of specifics as well. To represent Charlestown, what is an area that you are very passionate about, and what is your sense of what you could do about that?
Okay, well...
You mentioned health, obviously.
Yeah, I mentioned health. So, unfortunately, a lot of these issues are federal issues. A lot of the big stuff that's been talked about is federal. The Liberal Party's cutting funding to health nationwide has really cut back on plans that were in place around activity-based funding. And what that was about was streamlining funding to areas of need. And to basically you have a set amount of patients that you can do, say in a theatre, and you might have a full ward of patients ready for procedures, but you can't do those procedures on those patients to get them out of the hospital. So that ward backs up. You have patients coming into emergency. They need to go to the ward. They can't go in, so they stay in emergency. And then you've got that patient coming in the ambulance. Can't come into the emergency department. Got to stay in the ambulance. And so I would have liked to have seen that idea followed through all the way. So essentially, being in a position of power, trying to lobby people and, talking to the right people about it.
Well, let's talk about that notion of lobbying, that notion of imagining yourself in Parliament, how you would get on with a major party, given your attitude to major parties.
Well, I'm not... my attitude is, they're people as well. I wouldn't be confrontational. I don't necessarily disagree with everything that they say or their ideas. And I think it's important to be able to work out differences and come up with the best outcome instead of just putting up, a brick wall and saying, look, this is my agenda and it's that or nothing. It doesn't get anyone anywhere.
Also, we're talking about donations. We're talking about the donation system. What is your attitude to changes to funded donations electorally?
Well, everyone can follow my footsteps and spend no money at all, which I don't know how good that would be because probably none of these people here even know who I am. But I'm not spending any money. It shouldn't be up to the public to pay for it because otherwise then you could have 100 people running and how do you police that? But I think the media does a good job. I've talked to some people in the media and they've been quite supportive. So look, I don't know what the perfect system is. Between now and the 25th, Between now and the 25th? What's your plan? Just a bit more of the same. Just try and get involved in these kind of discussions. Get as much coverage in the media as I can. Put things on Facebook, and basically that's about it. Okay. And one last question. It's one that keeps coming up. We're talking about public transport. We're talking about the quality of life in Charlestown and the surrounding region. Where's your take on that? What's your take on that? Well, having lived in Sydney, public transport, there was a lot more there, but it wasn't perfect. I don't know how much appetite there is for public transport in this area. I'm sure there's experts that could tell me. But one idea I'd like is to see, specifically in Charlestown major areas and in Newcastle, is to why not have a trial period? Historical evidence might not be enough. If you offered decent services, maybe people would use them.
All right. Thanks for talking. Thank you. Mark Stein. Now, Veronica Hope. Please welcome her to the dais for 2 minutes presentation.
Thanks, Garth. Okay. There is no doubt in my mind that of the candidates here, I would be the best parliamentarian because I am absolutely no nonsense. I have so little tolerance for nonsense that my number one campaign pledge is to be in the community at an event from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. every single Saturday that I am in office. That way, the people of Charlestown can never let me forget that I'm in Parliament to represent them, and they'll be able to say what they want to my face every week. My major policy platforms are all common sense. I want to turn Charlestown into a service economy by enticing big business to move into empty buildings, bring IT, communications and media jobs to Charlestown City. The kinds of jobs that appeal to our kids. Since 4 out of 5 Australians now work in service industries, that's pretty common sense. I want to double the amount of bus services that go to John Hunter Hospital by creating bus loops. Since parking at the John Hunter since parking availability at the John Hunter is only about half what is required, it's common sense that creating interconnecting circular routes will give our transport system the frequency and reliability of services that it needs to present a viable alternative to car travel. I know, because I got here by train and my cousin ended up picking me up from the station, or else I wouldn't have got here at all. Charlestown's incidence of alcohol-related assaults are 2.4 times that of North Sydney's. Common sense tells us that alcohol is a community problem that needs community solutions, like addressing mental health with men's sheds and with entertainment venues and with job creation. A no-nonsense administrator has time to consider key state issues that big parties can choose to avoid, crucial issues like adoption and hospital nurse-to-patient ratios and geomapping. No Labor candidate would touch geomapping with a 10-foot pole, and New South Wales will stay in the dark age until the state is properly mapped online. Google, for example, thinks tonight's event is in Charlestown, Wisconsin, because the state government hasn't told Google that Charlestown, New South Wales matters too. After 30 years of Labor's Richard Face at the helm of Charlestown, we have more pokies in New South Wales than in Las Vegas, because Face was the Minister for Gaming and Racing, and no Hunter development because Face was the Minister for that too. Common sense should tell Novocastrians that we need to shrug off this working class identity that has made us Labor's pawns, and the Greens too, because they're in bed preference-wise. There is hope for Charlestown. You need a no-nonsense representative, and I am it. Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk public transport's come up. Interesting to note that students can't get from Raymond Terrace to the university with public transport. Can I get a sense from you, you talked about circular routes. Are you looking at beyond this? Do you look at the big picture when it comes to transport, public transport?
I'm specifically looking at circular routes because I am looking at the big picture of public transport. When I've been thinking critically about the public transport system in Sydney and in Charlestown for a long time, and obviously the whole Hunter, and you have to look at how people actually get around town before you try and get them into town. The big observation that I had from everybody around town was, why are people coming in from Maitland to Wickham, potentially, and then out to wherever else they need to go? They don't need to go to Wickham 9 times out of 10. So what I've noticed when I have had my eyes open in the last year or so, and I've been looking really critically at it, is that half the time you see buses and they're out of service. You know, and it says not in service, and you just go, well, where's that bus going? Why are we paying for a bus driver to be there? Like, why is he not working on a loop, basically? And John Hunter Hospital is the place that actually, you know, services people that can't get themselves around. They're disabled people, they're old people. You know, people have told me that they can't get on and off this bus, that they're supposed to get off at Wickham and catch the bus, like they can't even get on it. So, yeah, it seems absolutely logical to me to make sure that there is more of an interconnecting loop between the homes and the schools and all those different places, and then you can have economic activity along all those routes and then build a train line that fits into that.
You talked about a healthy economy, you talked about attracting business. When you look at the diversity of business that could be prioritised in this region, mining, tourism, technology, science, the like, what's your area of preference?
My area of preference is definitely service industries. I have a website called the Tourism News, been running it for a few years, and I've been trying to look at all the different communication jobs. I've wanted to move back here my whole life, but I've lived in Sydney because there's been no work here. I'm very highly educated. My older 6 brothers and sisters are highly educated, and none of us can stay together because we can't find jobs here. So the good thing about the services industry is that it's not anti-mining, it's not anti-manufacturing, it supports those industries. Mining's primary, manufacturing obviously is secondary, and then you've got the services industry that markets and sells those things, you know, puts them online, has the government support. Those offices can easily be in Charlestown, there's nothing difficult about it.
And your realistic aspirations for this period, this interesting period of election?
I think it comes back to my key pledge of actually being in the community every week, because then I will still see what the ongoing problems are, and I can't forget what, you know, like the more people I meet every weekend and the more people I have to face, the less I can forget what they actually need. So, you know, even a very seasoned politician couldn't get much done in 3 months. So you need to be realistic, you know, I can take that time to learn the ropes. That's good.
Okay, we've got 30 seconds. Development generally, we're looking at, we've had questions about high rise, about development. What's your take on development and how far?
Well, this is
go?
always pertinent in tourism because it's always people's lifestyle in a beautiful location versus the developer. But we actually have all the rules there. They're in place. They've been put in place over the last 50 years. I have a phrase on my website, and I very strongly believe that it's not just the law, it's the administration of the law that matters. And if people are forced to follow the law, if they're scrutinised properly and everything like that, then we can have plenty of development, but it should be organic. Have you noticed in Newcastle there's huge spaces between all the different areas, and that is not logical. So
All right.
thank you, Garth, and thank you.
Thank you. And our last candidate to come up and give his 2-minute presentation, Luke Cubis.
Good evening, everybody. I just want to start briefly with a few things about myself, just so that when you're considering your preferences, you've got some information. But my name's Luke Cubis, I'm 34 years old, born and bred in the local area, went through schools here, studied locally at the University of Newcastle, did a double degree in teaching, also have a Masters in Education. I worked locally as a teacher for almost a decade, and that's part of the reason why I'm now running here. I just have a number of areas where I'd really like to see some change, particularly our quality services, areas of health, education, obviously for me is a major one, emergency services, roads and transport. They definitely need more funding and focus. On top of that, I'd like to see more of a thorough investigation into the corruption. I really just wonder how deep it's run and how widespread it is. And I think we just need to bring some more honesty and integrity back into our politics. A further reason why I'm running, I believe that I'm someone who can provide that. Currently work locally now, doing a lot of volunteer work in the community and working over the road at Charlestown Square as a guest services officer, which is essentially concierge, and again just giving back to the community. And I think the idea of a politician is meant to be someone who represents the people, someone who really has a heart for the Charlestown electorate, and I believe that's me, and that's another reason why I'm running.
Thanks, Luke. So let's talk about the corruption. Let's talk about the notion of electoral donations. What's your feeling about what we're hearing about what is going to happen by March? Is that something that appeases you to a point?
Look, I guess it's one of those things we'll probably never know the true extent of what's happened. A lot of the people that have been caught, particularly recently with the Liberal guys, were things they did back in 2011. So even between now and March, I just wonder how many more people will be caught and how much they can do.
We might chuck a couple of alleged laws in there as well.
Yes.
Questions have been asked about development, because development, it suggests, breeds a healthier economy. Can I get your general take on development and how important that is or not to this region for you?
Mm-hmm. Look, it's important. We need to just make sure we find that balance. I guess if we were to overdevelop everything and wipe out all the trees, we'd have no oxygen to breathe. But at the same time, we don't want to turn everything into a concrete jungle. And we need to just find that balance of maintaining our parks, making sure our lake and beaches and waterways are all protected, but not being left behind, not becoming an area where there's no development, where people don't want to invest, just in order that our economy can keep moving forwards and we can further address the issue of unemployment as well, which is a major concern.
In amongst those areas of mining, tourism, technology and science, obviously, and I guess there's education in there as well to do with that. What of those areas to you are the most attractive options for us in the future in this region?
Oh, look, I think it's difficult to single any out. Because of my background, I certainly think education is fundamental, but you could also argue a case that all of those industries are fundamental, particularly for our Charlestown electorate and the greater Newcastle and Hunter area. So you can't really single any out for special praise or funding. I think we really need to focus on all of them and make sure that we make them as good and effective as possible.
For those people that ask and have done several times about the huge problem to do with youth unemployment, that's obviously, I would imagine, something that's close to your heart. Can you give us a sense of any strategies that you have considered?
Yeah, look, again, a lot of it does come down to funding, and it is finding that balance between where you can put your money to help as many people as you can. But certainly in the school system and the TAFE campuses, we need to look at better just vocational opportunities, apprenticeships and training schemes, even in opportunities for business. If we can find ways to accommodate younger employees and give businesses incentives to employ them, I think certainly those things are something we really need to look at.
And realistically, your aspirations for this period, this leading up to the 25th and beyond?
Yeah, look, it's. I think. So you mean in terms of just this election, or what would happen as a result?
Well, I guess
or?
let's look at this election first. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, look, just working as hard as I can between now and then, just to show people that, look, for anyone out there who's not happy with some of the traditional parties, that there is an alternative, and just working hard for the community and showing them there are other people that also care about seeing our interests looked after.
Well, Cubis, thanks very much for talking to me.
Thank you. Thanks, Ralph.
All right, well, you've had a chance to listen to the 2-minute presentations from our candidates and the 4-minute interviews that go with that. We're going to revert back to our original numbering as far as your final 1-minute presentation. So we will start with Jodie. We'll go through to Luke Arms, Sue Ellen Wrightson, Brian Tucker, RJ Martin, Mark Skye, Veronica Hope. We'll have Philippa Parsons for Jane Oakley again, of course, and Luke Cubis. So I'll just hand the microphone to you first, Jodie. If you'd like to pass it on down the line, I'll just make sure that is what. It'll be Big Luke right next to you, so we'll just pass it down like that.
I just want to reiterate the 3 key areas that I'm committed to working on if elected. They are local jobs and making sure that government supports these through its procurement policies, and also making sure that its procurement policies support apprenticeships and traineeships. I'm wanting to work for a quality education system, both at a school and a vocational level, and that means ensuring that there's proper resources available for teachers and support staff to ensure that kids with difficulties are supported, and also in a TAFE system that there's a proper cost and proper fees associated, not blown out like they currently have done, and also to make sure that we've got a properly resourced health system, particularly at John Hunter Hospital, and making sure that we've got appropriate emergency response times and ratios in staff there. I know that I've got to earn your trust. I'm not going to make personal accusations against other candidates. I want to be clean about this. And I ask that you judge me not on what I say that I will do, but on my actions to date. I do have a history, you know what my history is, and I'm more than happy to stand on that. I ask you to judge me on that and on council's performance against others. And I really thank you for your time and interest tonight.
Thanks, Jodie. Over your times. You've probably noticed that I haven't made any specific promises tonight. Unfortunately, none of us are in a position to make specific promises that we'll actually be able to keep if we're elected on the 25th, such as life in opposition and on the crossbench. Here's what I will try to do if I'm elected in a general, non-specific, realistic type of way. I'll work hard to restore funding to TAFE, if that's possible, to schools and to healthcare, and I'll strongly oppose privatisation in these sectors. TAFE, aged care and disability care in particular are about to be annihilated by the coalition. I'll pioneer the use of relatively unmoderated social media for accessible, accountable and transparent communication with my electorate, with you, Charlestown. I believe that robust dialogue between constituents and their representatives should be the lifeblood of politics in this age of 24/7 access to Facebook. A bit less broadcast, a bit more conversation. I'll campaign for common sense reforms that will help remove the influence of big money and return the power to the people. I'll demand the government use evidence rather than ideology to support its policies, and I'll give voice to facts and science wherever possible. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Luke. Sue Ellen.
In summing up, I believe I've spoken enough about the policies and things that I believe are important, but right at the top, the most important thing is that the community is taken along for the ride with the community representative. I have some ideas, but it's what the community needs is the most important thing. When I announced that I was running as a candidate, I announced that I would create the Charlestown Community Cabinet, and that cabinet would be made up of representatives from various groups within the electorate, including health, education, sporting, environment, community groups. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know best in every area. What I will say to you is that I'm taking those key members of the community with me, and I will carry their comments and their feedback through with my decision making. The community is number one. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. Brian Tucker.
Well, the political system in this state is in turmoil, and we currently have corruption on the left, corruption on the right. But I thank God for the Reverend Fred Nile and the CDP, who have been able to instil a sense of integrity and honesty within the Parliament. And this is one of the reasons that Fred has been asked to chair the inquiry into Newcastle. As I interact with members of the community, I sense a level of betrayal and abandonment by previous governments on both sides of politics. And I see the mere fabric of our society being stripped away, bit by bit. Things that were once not tolerated have now sadly become the norm within our society. The decline in society standards has largely occurred because Christian values of truth, justice, honesty and integrity have been deemed unfashionable and worthy of scorn.
Heard of the Royal Commission? Nonsense.
They are values that our community as a whole and our children can thrive from. As a CDP candidate for Charlestown, I am a voice for families and the working class, and a voice for values and ethics. The Christian Democratic Party that I represent has always stood for honesty, dignity and stability. It is these fundamental values that neither of the other parties can deliver.
Brian, we'll have to wrap it up there for reasons of fairness. Thank you. RJ Martin, your 60 seconds.
So, in electing me as caretaker for the next 5 months, if I'm useless, get rid of me. Don't vote for me in March. If I do a good job, then keep me on. Like a money-back guarantee, as I keep telling people. There's a lot of important things in the area going on. Some have to be kept a little bit secret for now until there's parliamentary privilege, etc. Involved. Unfortunately, that's the way things are in today's society. We've already seen demonstrated some rude people to both myself and to Brian here, which, funnily enough, Brian was just talking about things that used to be not accepted, interrupting people while they're presenting, people doing all that kind of thing, and now it is a norm.
I think it's been happening for a while. Would you wrap up now?
Yeah. So what I offer is a non-partisan representation of the people of Charlestown. I don't care if someone's a rusted on Labor person, welded on Liberal, they're a Green, whatever. There's no party that has a monopoly on great ideas nor on terrible ideas. We're all supposed to be people of Charlestown, electorate, Lake Macquarie, Newcastle, New South Wales, Australia. We're not necessarily meant to be, you know, little factions here, there, everywhere, all trying to compete with each other in an aggressive manner, etc.
All right,
Thank you.
we'll wrap up there. Thank you, RJ. Now, I'll just flick it across, thank you, Veronica, to Mark Sky.
Yeah, well, I guess if you elect me, in that 5 months, I would, hold whichever government it is accountable, but also try and help them on things like health, like I talked to Garth before, on infrastructure. I'd like to see laws on new home buyers grant changed. I think it's unfair that new home buyers who want to take a grant have to compete against foreign buyers for new properties, while federally wealthy people looking to acquire investment properties can take all those grants through negative gearing. But at the end of the day, whatever I want to try and do for Charlestown, I'm not going to do it by dictating terms. It has to be done through compromise.
Great, thank you, Mark. To Veronica Hope, thank you.
The independent senator for South Australia, Nick Xenophon, in his maiden speech in Parliament, said that politics is not a matter of left and right, it's a matter of right and wrong. And when Kevin Rudd wanted to give every Australian $900 each, Nick was able to stand up and he got $900 million for the Murray River, which nobody else wanted to do. And that's the kind of power that an independent can have. And especially in the coming elections in March, there's actually going to be 23 seats up for grabs because 10 are retiring, the jig is up. It's, so that is actually a balance of power situation. I can actually make one big pledge to be in the electorate every single Saturday, and then I can never forget what I'm going to do for the people of Newcastle. I'm the youngest of 7 kids, and none of my highly qualified family, including a lawyer, a special needs teacher, a youth worker, and a biochemist, can find decent work here. They are all service industries. I have built the tourism news from skills I learnt in Sydney in the advertising industry and in communications. I'm actually doing all of this, truth be told, for my niece Jessica. Cry. My niece is 12 years old. I'm extremely worried about her. Jessica is very bright. She's has a million bucks. My Uncle Bill, my cousin Brad, and my cousin Katie will tell you that she is absolute gold. I'm really scared that she could fall through the cracks if jobs aren't available to her in Charlestown. And it's actually very easy. My brother is dead set that she is going to uni, and she is very bright, but if she can't actually see where her future is going, she's not going to make it through year 11 and 12. If she can't see light at the end of the tunnel, she's not going to get there.
All right, well, we might have to wrap it up there for reasons of fairness. Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you.
Veronica, thank you. I'll just pass the microphone to Philip Parkins in this order for Jane Oakley.
Thank you. And thank you for having me stand in for Jane Oakley. The Greens are a party of integrity. We are known for integrity. We regularly fight for transparency and accountability in government. We stand for retaining public transport, public education, public health. We stand for reforming the current broken planning laws in this state. Case in point is the currently proposed overdevelopment at Whitebridge that the Greens have been involved in fighting with the community from the very beginning, and the planning inquiry currently underway that includes that proposed development within its terms of reference was instigated and successfully moved in Parliament by Greens MP David Shoebridge. I have known Jane Oakley for a period of 5 years from my term on council, and she was involved in various community activism. Jane is a woman of integrity, and I'm proud to stand here for her and advocate for the Greens. We want clean air, clean water and clean politics, and if you do too, can I suggest that on the 25th of October you vote clean and you vote Green for Jane Oakley. Thank you.
Thanks, Philippa. And to wrap up last, we've got Luke Cubis.
Thanks, Garth. There's an annual poll that comes out on professions that are most trusted, and funnily enough, politicians are always in the bottom five. For me, it's been a big shift because teachers are always in the top five, and I'm hoping to bring some of that, I guess, trust and respect that the industry can have at times across into the political sector, because I really do want to see a bit of a shift in that area. I would like to see more honesty and transparency in people who hold other people accountable and just ask why they've made the decisions they have. Truly will fight for the people of the Charlestown electorate, and I particularly would like to see more funding in our quality services, health, education, emergency services, roads and transport.
Thank you, Luke. That's it from me. And now to wrap up, we've got Bernie Curran once again.
Thank you very much, Garth, and thanks very much to all of you for your presentations. Thanks for the standard of your presentations, the thoughts and the ideals that you've presented. I'll just go through the names and identify what they represent. The Jane Oakley, Greens, represented by Philippa Parsons. Jodie Harrison, Labor. Luke Arms, Independent. Sue Ellen Wrightson, supported by the Palmer United Party. Brian Tucker, Christian Democrats. RJ Martin, Independent. Veronica Hope, I've got Veronica in the right order there, Independent. Mark Sky, Independent. And Luke Cubis, Independent. Thank you all. Thanks very much to Garth for your questions. Thanks for the way you handled it. I'm sure I speak on your behalf in saying we appreciate the way you did it. Thanks to Ross Kerrich and Robin Considine from the Newcastle Institute. Georgia, you've done a great job. You can relax there, have a good night's sleep. To Josh and Liam, thanks very much for your work on Bar TV. Send it to the world, because this, tonight, is the world. Thanks to the questioners who sent their questions. We tried to do justice to you. Thanks very much to you for being with us tonight. This, as you know, this is the building blocks of the political process, and this is, in a sense, somebody said it tonight, I'm not sure which one, but he needs to get around and talk to more people like this. These are the fora, these are the places where the messages, because there's no doubt we've all been disillusioned, disappointed. We've been desperate to see the political process working as it's meant to work. We all want to regain control of our lives, and as we've just heard, the lives of our children and our grandchildren. We want to get rid of the sense of helplessness that's taken over us in the last 12 months. We will not give trust until it's earned. That's a given as a result of so many things that have been said tonight and so many things that have felt before. We want our vote to count. We want it to be alive and not submerged between the hidden and the unseen powers. Our vote is our stake in the democratic process. We want to see words translated into action. We want rhetoric to become reality. And we all have learnt that we all need to lift our games as citizens and to make sure that we get more involved in the political process so that what has happened cannot and must not happen again. So that's why this sort of event is important for you as candidates, for us as citizens, for those who played a part in trying to create a forum of ideas that are not only relevant to Charlestown, they're relevant to Newcastle and they're relevant to Australia. The political process and the particular problems that we have in our community. Thanks to all of you. Thanks everybody. Have a good night. And again, Thanks, Garth. Thank you.